This week on The Futurists, Evan Shapiro.
Calling television today, television, the way that we called television in 1975 is like calling a rocket ship an automobile. They're two different mechanisms. They have no likeness to each other.
Hey there, welcome back to The Futurist. I'm Rob Terzic, and this week I'm on my own. My business partner and co-host, Brett King, is in Thailand after he's been working his butt off in Dubai, getting us set up for this big event that we're doing at the end of September. We're bringing the world's leading futurists together in Dubai at the fabulous Jumeirah Beach Hotel on the 22nd and 23rd of September. If you're interested in that, contact me or Brett through socials. We'd be very happy to hook you up with tickets. It's a great group of people that's coming together, including some of the world's leading futurists and astronaut Scott Kelly. So we've been working on this for quite a while. We're very excited to finally turn this podcast into a real live world event where we can meet in person. In the meantime, I'm going to be taking a look at an industry I've been very fond of and very involved with for a long time, an industry that's going through a tremendous amount of turmoil. And our guest this week is someone who's been paying very close attention to the turmoil for a number of years. He's a very opinionated analyst, but in some respects, I call him a presentist. So first, let me give a warm welcome to Evan Shapiro, and then I'll explain what I mean by a presentist. Hey, Evan, welcome to the show.
Good to be here. Thanks for having me.
So you're officially billing yourself as a media cartographer. So I guess start out by telling us, what the heck is a media cartographer? What does that mean?
So a number of years ago, about 5 years ago, I created a map, an infographic of the entire media universe, all of big tech, all of big media on one flat surface. And it looks like a map. And what's happened since, Deadline published it, it kind of blew up. And what's happened since is people now use it as the navigation tool for the media universe. And it uses math to scale the various players in the media universe in juxtaposition to each other. But it also really, I think, helps over time demonstrate not just where we are, but demonstrates a view of where we're going.
And if you look at the maps from the last 3 or 4 years, you can see real strong evidence of trends that helps you kind of forecast what's coming next. We'll jump into that. But the reason I introduced you as a presentist is that I interviewed a fellow New Yorker a few months ago, and he gave me a ton of grief because he's like, wow, the word futurist is the most pretentious thing, and you can't call me that. And I'm like, okay, that's fair. Like, I agree. It is kind of pretentious, and it's a little bit lame. On the other hand, that's the term that people use to talk about people who think about the future. That speaker said, call me a presentist. He goes, I don't really concern myself so much with the future, but what I'm trying to do is tell people what's going on right now so that they can make better decisions about right now so that they're around in the future. And I thought that was quite an interesting thing, because to me, that's kind of what you're doing. I read your stuff on LinkedIn. I follow you. I read your newsletter. And for the folks who are listening, Evan speaks mainly to an audience that's involved in television and broadcasting and streaming. And those are 3 of the principal media businesses. But he speaks more broadly than that, because when he talks about the media universe, it covers everything from games to chat. So AI chatbots are in there, and also chat applications like Instagram and WhatsApp. So media broadly defined is all of that stuff, and streaming audio and everything else you might think of, podcasts and so forth. And because he covers it that broadly, he notices trends from the periphery that people who are in the TV business or the broadcasting industry often miss because they're myopically focused on their own industry. So let's use that as a starting point, because I think, Evan, that to my mind is what distinguishes you from a lot of other industry. There's a lot of smart people who cover the TV industry, but they're so blinkered. They've got blinders on both sides. So they really can't tell you what's going on in an adjacent industry. And as a result, they're really kind of caught flat-footed when you ask them a question about TikTok or YouTube. You take a different view. You have a more broad perspective. Tell me about that.
I think that was a great setup. In particular, you're absolutely right. I'm much more of a presentist than I am a futurist, mostly because I'm incredibly frustrated by the industry's lack of ability to know what's going on around it right now. And I'll give you a really good example. I had a debate with someone on LinkedIn today he wrote this long article about how YouTube isn't television.
Yeah. That idea still persists to this day.
Yeah, and by
Can't
the way,
kill that idea.
if you look at Nielsen's own data from July, YouTube has now 13.5% of all television usage, way far ahead of all of Disney, all of NBC Universal. So
And that's YouTube on the TV, not YouTube on the phone or the tablet or the computer, but YouTube on television
that's
is
YouTube.
completely outclassing what we think of as the leading TV companies.
That's exactly right. It's only YouTube on TV, and it excludes YouTube TV, their cable business.
Oh, wow.
Only includes premium or regular YouTube, long form. It excludes shorts too. So it's just regular, usual, old school YouTube on the television. There are a billion people who watch podcasts on TV. And this guy who made this post, he to make his point, he said, well, people don't pay attention to the tab that they're not looking at. And I literally said to him, that is a reference from 10 years ago. You're referencing people watching YouTube on laptops, not even on phones, on laptops. And in the picture that he made with AI, by the way, he shows somebody watching YouTube on on a laptop, as opposed to, even using a phone versus a television set. But that's one just data point.
Right. So the disconnect there is that the guy is not even responding to the fact that YouTube is now the leading source of video programming on television. Right. Not on a laptop, not on a
That's
phone.
exactly right. He's not responding to that. But the references he makes within his own thing is he said, well, it's an aquarium. It's just background. More people watch NewsHour on YouTube than on PBS. More people watch Frontline on YouTube than on PBS. Joe Rogan, not a fan, but he's one of the biggest podcasts in the world. A third of his audience is on TV. When someone sits down and watches a Joe Rogan episode on television, that's not an aquarium. That's not lean forward and scrolling. That is a talk show,
Yeah.
just like any other talk show. When somebody watches a half an hour of Dhar Mann or Mr. Beast or Amelia DeMoldenberg, Chicken Shop Date, that is a television show to them. There is absolutely no question about that. Doesn't matter what your opinion is. It's in the
It's also true that quite a lot of television watching is background. People are doing household chores and so on. That's
HGTV is as much aquarium.
all of daytime TV was basically somebody's at home doing the chores and they've got the game show on or the talk show or the news magazine show.
Exactly right. I'll give you another data point that personifies the presentist and also the just blindness. You want to know how an industry all goes blind at the same time. I'll stand up in front of audiences like you do all over the world, and I'll ask people in the television business or in any part of the media continuum, do you read the earnings reports of your own company, your competitors, and your clients? And less than 5% raise their hand. These are not difficult documents, right? These are, maybe 8 pages long. They're very simple to read. And nobody's reading them.
It's true. You should actually buy stock in your competitors, right?
Yeah, that's like a doctor coming in and giving you a diagnosis without having read your x-rays. Right. And so you want to know how the industry goes blind all at once, how they're missing everything that's going on right now. Just ask them a simple question. Where do 30-year-olds get their news? How do 25-year-olds watch TV? Where are your kids watching, Jeopardy or certain other elements of their entertainment continuum? And they may know, but they're not really paying attention. And then they twist the data to meet their own confirmation bias, as opposed to letting the audience tell them what they want with the data. The data is the voice of the audience. The earnings calls and the 10Ks, that is the thermometer of the companies that you're working around. And if you're not paying attention to those two things, the voice of your audience and the health of the competitors and clients and companies you work for, well, then you deserve to become obsolete.
Okay, now you're referring to companies. We haven't been very specific. So for the benefit of our audience, let's get a little more specific about who you're levying this critique against. And I'm going to start, I'll say traditional media companies. So in the past 30 years, we've seen most of the media business consolidated into a very small number of companies. And this isn't just true in the United States. It's true on a global basis, usually on a national basis. There are big media companies that tend to dominate the landscape, where in the 1990s, there were hundreds of media companies. Today, there's really not that many. And if you want to see that process, just take a look at Evan's landscapes, his media landscape chart, because you'll see exactly what I mean. There's a few dots that keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger. What's interesting about that chart, though, is that the really big companies in the media business are the same companies that are the big companies on NASDAQ. They are the big tech companies, right? So the companies that dominate our landscape across the board in every industry, the future of the United States, the future of the world in the sense of business, are the Googles, the Apples, the Microsofts, and so forth. And it turns out that in the media business, these companies have a very huge media portfolio as well. We don't always think of Microsoft as a media company, but it owns most of the game companies, right? We don't always think of Google as a media company per se, but they're the largest seller of advertising against any type of media in the world. So first thing, the sort of first aha moment, I think, is, when we define the media landscape, there's some players in there that are gigantic, but we don't always include them in our set. The second thing is, relative to those big companies are what we call big media. So that would be, the WarnerBros Discovery, formerly known as Time Warner, formerly known as Warner Media, or Disney, or Paramount, whatever it was formerly known as, and so on, and Comcast, whatever it's soon going to be known as. These are all companies that are going through massive reorganization right now, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a second. But they're relatively small. And when I say small, they are less than a tenth of the size of the big technology companies. So they're really tiny. And these are the big media companies that we all grew up thinking were the giants that dominated the media business. Tell me about that trend, because that's going on right now.
Yeah. So what's fascinating is that the history continues to repeat itself. Broadcasters made fun of cable as not TV, and then cable took over television. Then big TV looked at streaming and said it will never be significant. Now Netflix is worth more than Disney, Paramount, Comcast, Fox, and Warner Brothers Discovery combined.
Wow.
Just Netflix. And they're, I would say, the kind of hybrid big tech, big media company, right?
And they're pretty small for a big tech company relative to
now
Google.
$500 billion. So they're getting there, right? They're on their way to $1 trillion valuation. I don't think there's any question about that. That said, they're also now morphing into a very traditional television company. Remember when they said they wouldn't take advertising? Now they're taking advertising. Remember when they said they would never do sports? Now they're doing sports. The deal they made in France with TF1, which is a very traditional media company, turns in France Netflix into basically cable television.
Mm-hmm.
And Amazon's doing the same thing with France Television. I think it is interesting that, big tech, you're absolutely right. They are monsters in the media world, but only in as much as they are the tools that consumers use to control their media. Apple makes television, but they're not really a television company, right? In a more apt positioning, they are the gateway to all entertainment for Apple users. YouTube is not really an entertainment company. Yes, they have football here in the United States, but mostly YouTube is simply a pathway. It is a distribution mechanism. It is the new age of Comcast. Amazon, they make some television and they have Thursday Night Football and they're about to get the NBA. But if you look at what they're doing, they're really gravitating away from being the presenter and being much more of a conduit and an aggregator. They just signed Peacock distribution deal this week. They are now one of the largest aggregators of other people's premium streaming platforms. Peacock, HBO Max, Disney are all now distributing across the Amazon platform. And then when you think about media itself, writ large, subscriptions is a big part of it, but advertising is obviously one of the largest parts about it. What's fascinating is when you look at advertising, Mad Men, when you think about how the ad game works, 60% of all ad dollars on the face of the earth go to 3 companies: Google, Meta, Amazon. Amazon now has a $55-60 billion advertising business, and it's only going to get bigger. So you have, this world that the norms, the industry norms, the practices, and the industry, basically tenants were developed by Disney and Warner Brothers and Paramount and the rest. And they're being reinvented by big tech. But big tech doesn't really actually want to be in the entertainment business. They just want to be in the customer retention business. They want to be in the platform business. They'd much rather you watch Disney on Amazon or on YouTube or on on Meta than making content is hard, man. It's not something that people actually really in the tech business want to do. I mean, Jeff Bezos wants to prove how big his dick is over and over and over again. So he loves to walk the red carpet and make rockets shaped like penises and the biggest yacht in the world. But beside that, ultimately, if you look at the moves Amazon is making, in particular, this week they took Albert Chang out of the pole position on entertainment and moved him into AI. That's a very, very telling scenario. They fired their old head of entertainment and didn't replace her. So,
and they've had trouble placing people at MGM, the studio that they bought 5 years ago.
Well, because they just keep. They don't want to be in the content business in the way that, the way that Ted Sarandos.
So they're like reluctant programmers. The big tech companies are reluctantly in the programming business, but they're really there to do customer acquisition and retention, and they don't really care about the content. So that's quite different from the days of David O. Selznick or MGM, the kind
Even Ted Sarandos, who still wants to make movies and television shows and entertainment and really gets off on, knowing Obama and being a media mogul. The key, though, is that they're basically data businesses.
Yeah.
The big tech companies, these are data businesses. And that's a great business to be in. And it leaves the paths open for the traditional media players to transform themselves if they choose to. But they're not. They're not choosing to transform. And I'll give you two classic examples. WarnerBros Discovery, which combined Discovery and Warner Brothers and then shed 80% of their value in the ensuing 3 years, is now splitting back apart into those two companies. What the what?
It's astonishing.
What the
bring us back to the 90s and AOL.
Comcast, rather than trying to transform their businesses, their cable businesses, into the next version of what they should be and could be, you have the pole position. It's yours to lose.
Yeah.
But rather than doing the hard work of transforming into the digital age and using these tech platforms as distribution platforms, they're giving up. They're ejecting the old businesses and the cash flow that comes with them. Think about that for a second. There's tons of cash flow at the cable business that Comcast Cabletown is ejecting into what they are going to call Versant. There's tons of cash flow that is being ejected with the cable businesses. Then you look at Disney, who I think is finally getting around to transformation in the right way. You look at what they're doing with ESPN right now, and it is genius. It is the market standard. They are transforming it into a standalone digital product that will be, I think, very successful ultimately. But they're not doing it in a kind of slash and burn way. They're creating a standalone streaming service, and they're doing really landmark deals with Charter and Comcast and DirecTV, where you can buy ESPN as a standalone product. Actually, no, I'm sorry. It's built into the price of your cable package. So ultimately, you're paying for it.
In a way, they're recreating the cable bundle from the old.
They are. That's exactly right. For the new age.
Yep.
But in my mind, so far to date, there is only one traditional media company that has truly transformed appropriately for the digital age, and that's the New York Times. The New York Times was a paper product driven primarily by advertising, delivered by diesel mother trucks. And that's a decade and, it's 12, 15 years ago, right? They were dying. We all ripped them off. BuzzFeed's the new thing. Now they are, I think, the greatest lifestyle suite of media services on the planet. They are one of the most important gaming companies on the planet. They are, I think, the single best podcasting company on the planet. Their machine learning subscription mechanism will not let you break up with it. It is the how of subscriptions.
Try to unsubscribe.
I can't do that.
I tried. It's very difficult. You
can't do it. It's genius. It's genius. But if the gray lady can transform itself for the digital age, then it can be done by, it's a family run business, right? It's the equivalent of a milk truck. And they somehow transformed themselves appropriately for the digital age, and then did so well, they bought The Athletic, who swore when they launched that they would crush the New York Times like a bug. So it can be done, but you have to choose to do the things that, as Kennedy said, we choose to do the things that are hard. You know what I mean? We make the difficult decisions because that's our responsibility. What?
Otherwise,
Fuck
you're just a
off. You don't say
caretaker on a
anything.
sinking ship, and then the ship is going to go down eventually, and hopefully not on your watch. That seems to be how a lot of media companies are doing it.
It's
Let's
the
just
boat
take a second to
naufrage.
let that
It's
sink in with the New York Times, what you said about the Times, because I want the audience to really get this point. So you have a company that was a print newspaper company known as America's newspaper of record, perhaps, but initially it was really a New York paper. Now it's
yeah,
nationwide. Okay, so they kind of supplanted USA Today. That business was going nowhere. Today they're a game publisher that has a really good cookbook business,
yeah.
and that also, that also has like I don't know what you even call it, like kind of a Wired magazine reviews
Wire
business that
cutter. Yeah.
sells hardware and sells products. So they've really transformed themselves into they've taken sections from the newspaper and kind of really imaginatively re-envisioned, well, what could this be in a digital environment where people can click and take an action and do something, and in a way, interact with the news, buy something perhaps, or engage with it in some way. That's pretty bold when you look at it that way. And you could imagine in the newsroom, I'll bet there was a lot of fervor over this. I bet
Yeah,
there were a
and
lot of turmoil.
you should read Mark Thompson's exit interview from when he left. And the other thing to remark about this is this was an old stodgy company. They hired the head of the BBC, the oldest and stodgiest company, and they hired a middle-aged white dude to come in and do the transformation. And yet it still worked. And when you read his exit interview, what you'll see is it was the culture that changed, not the business. They changed the way they looked at themselves. They changed the people who get to make decisions. They gave a tremendous amount of empowerment to 20 and 30 something product and project managers and let them do things and iterate and fail without running things up the flagpole. They let them iterate, fail and iterate, test and learn. And when I say that in front of old managers that I speak in front of, you can hear the butts clenching. And but that was the key. It wasn't we changed one thing or another. It's we allowed all change to happen. We allowed people to fail elegantly and learn from it and then iterate and improve. And that's what the machine learning subscription product does right now. It's a masterclass in transformation. And they continue it. Coppett, their new CEO, who's been there for a while now, she's taking it to the next level. It is a next level business. And meanwhile, where the is the Washington Post, owned by the greatest technologist who ever lived, Jeff
Yeah,
Bezos?
going nowhere fast.
Where is BuzzFeed? Where are the rest of these digital publications? Where is Daily Beast? Where's
Los Angeles Times, like,
LA Times going
yeah.
south fast? So you watch the ecosystem fail to transform, and then this newspaper masters it. And the other thing I think that's very crucial there is they're not chasing scale for scale's sake. It's not about 200 million subscribers. It's not 300 million subscribers. It's less than 15 million paying subscribers.
Oh, wow.
That's a key element. This isn't about pure reach. This isn't about pure scale. This is about community engagement,
Wow.
maximizing the revenue per ounce of love you have.
Who's doing it right in television? Sometimes people point to Fox News as like, a survivor, the last man standing in the cable news arena.
Yeah,
Some
but
people
that's
are point.
a cult, and so like you can't judge like that. They are the top 10 cable news program. I'm sorry, they're the top 10 cable programs, not just cable news. Fox has the top 10 cable programs every week, but that's because the median age of television viewers is 112 years old, and most of them are dead 10 weeks and they haven't turned off the television. So, it's not like Fox News is going up and to the right. They're doing fine. They're doing fine because old people still watch them and they're selling a lot of pharma ads. But it's not, I wouldn't call it a business that's crushing it. They're doing better than a lot.
Okay, so
But
in the dwindling arena of cable television, they're the best performer, but that whole industry is not. And just for the folks who are listening, these are not businesses that are going out of business tomorrow. Like television isn't falling off a cliff. It's an enormous, gigantic industry that's deflating slowly as a younger generation migrates to new platforms like TikTok and YouTube.
years after the invention of the automobile, people sold a lot of horseshoes.
Right.
And that's the period we're in. We're in that
Yeah.
period when, few people had cars and everybody still had horse and buggies, and we still sold buggy whips and horseshoes. But come on, we know where the road is going, right?
Mhm.
And what it took was the roads to be built. Well, tech has built the roads.
So your point about cable and the aging
So I
up.
think to your question about who's doing it right in television, the case study I gave you before is Disney seems to be doing it right. If you look at Iger in the last 12 months in particular, what he's done is he's decided to take the profits and revenues that still exist from television and reinvest them into streaming. And that's the way you do it. You take the dying revenues from one sector and you reinvest them into futures.
You would think that would be obvious, but I guess it's not. Okay, on that note, let's take a little break here. So we're going to go to break. Folks, you're listening to The Futurist. I'm Rob Tersick, and today I'm talking to Evan Shapiro, and we'll be right back after this. Hi, this is Rob Tersick from the Futurist podcast, which is part of the Provoked Media Network. I'm excited to tell you about some news. The Futurist is expanding into the real world. We're doing a live event in Dubai. Now, folks who listen to the Futurist podcast, you're going to be familiar with the fact that my co-host Brett King has been working very hard in Dubai and other parts of the Middle East for a long time. And for more than a year, he's been putting together this event. And now, with the help and support of MasterCard and Emirates MBD and many other partners, we are putting together the world's largest futurist meeting in Dubai. It will take place at the fabulous Jumeirah Beach Hotel in Dubai, and it'll be on the September 22nd and 23rd this year. The speakers are going to include some of the world's leading futurists and forecasters and future thinkers, people like Brian Cox and astronaut Scott Kelly. Of course, Brett and I will be there to conduct interviews and introduce some of the other folks. We've got speakers from around the world. And if you're interested in meeting futurists in person and participating in an event that attracts the future-minded, please join us on the 22nd and 23rd of September. You can learn more about it at futuristevent.com. That's futurist singular event.com. It's all one word. Futuristevent.com. And that'll tell you all about the event. I sure hope to see you there in Dubai on the 22nd and 23rd of September. Thanks. Hey there, you're listening to The Futurist. I'm Rob Tersick, and this week I'm talking to Evan Shapiro, the media cartographer. Evan and I have known each other for quite a while. I've been reading his material, but we met in person at this event in Las Vegas. One of the most fun things about the line of work I'm in is that often I'm invited to come to companies and share my perspectives, and sometimes I'll do a workshop with them. And when you do that, you can be much more candid and frank than you can be when you're talking in public, on stage, or even on a podcast, because you can get right into the depth of the subject. And I met Evan because he was the other guest speaker at that event, and he dropped a bomb on them about the media industry that left this entire room. Their heads were spinning because he spoke quite candidly and quite frankly about trends that are perfectly obvious if you're willing to pay attention. But like we've been talking about in the first half of this show, a lot of people in the media industry are very focused on today's operations, and they operate with the assumption that tomorrow will be just like yesterday, maybe with a 5% budget increase. None of that is true. And Evan is out there, the voice in the wilderness, telling people about that. A moment ago, we were talking about the up-aging of cable, as younger people just are not going to have that habit ever. 10 years ago, I was talking to a guy from CBS, and he was like, as soon as this generation gets kids and they start to get married and settle down, they're going to come back and watch television. I'm like, you're dreaming. So here it is, 10 years later, that's not happening. What is happening is there's a fragmentation of audience across platforms. Evan, give us a little perspective about that, because the way people get TV today is very different from the way we did 10 years ago.
Yeah, I think the two things to mention there is, those same people still say that. Like when they grow up, millennials are 45 years old. Gen Z is 30, right? And these are the first two generations that grew up on social media, the first two that grew up with supercomputers in their pockets.
Smartphones, exactly.
With access to the entire knowledge of humankind at their fingertips. The first post 9/11 generation. So they don't just see the world differently, they live in different worlds. So to talk about fragmentation, there is a real bifurcation of the media ecosystem into two parallel universes, one for millennials and younger, and another for Xers and older. And they don't watch, there's two intersections that they share, Netflix and podcasting. All ages do both. Other than those two, it's a very, very split ecosystem. Millennials and younger will never watch news on television. They just won't. And I don't care what the old people say, they're not going to suddenly grow up and like coffee or beer. It's not how it works. They watch news, they watch it online. More people in the United States get their news from social media than any other source, more than half. And that's because millennials are now 45. So they are a huge, if not most of the 18 to 49 demographic. And what they're not, Gen Z is, right? There are very few boomers left in the 18 to 49
It's true.
demographic. And so that's
On the other
why.
hand, the boomers are the most solipsistic generation in history. I speak from experience here. So
Yeah.
they tend to look at the whole world as a reflection of themselves. And because of their size and the number and their influence and culture, that's sort of been true. They've been I don't know, the pig and the python as they age up. But now they're aging up and out and they're into retirement age. And
And
as
the
far as
Xers are
media,
just still so resentful of having never been the boomers that they can't get out of their own way, and they say things like YouTube isn't television. Well, then you are a boomer. Like, let's just stop pretending that you're your own generation and
right,
just
they
learn to
adopt the
talk.
prejudices and biases of the previous generation. They live in the shadow of, and they can't develop a respect for younger audiences. So there's a clear split. Anybody under 30 today has a completely different media habit, and they're never going
It's
back.
becoming anyone under 50. That's the thing, is like there is this misperception that it's just the youngs. 70% of the world's population is millennials and younger. 70% of the world's population are millennials and younger. They're 45 and younger. So that's the split, 45. And you can, by the way, I have tons of data. Every time you
Mhm.
look at a different data point, that's where you see the split. 45 and younger, 45 and older. Next year it'll be 46 and younger. Then it'll be 47. Because get this, I don't know if your listeners know this, generations age. They get older.
Okay.
And that's and they bring their habits with them as they go. The other thing to remember, and I did a couple of experiments with Channel 4, CBC, and a couple of others. And in both cases, Channel 4 and CBC, they agreed after much consternation and gnashing of teeth that they would take their long form library and start putting it up on YouTube, because they agreed it after a lot of talk, and I had to make sure that they felt good about it, because there was this misperception internally that it would cannibalize their television audience.
We hear that a lot.
Yeah. And I said to them, do you have data that demonstrates that? And they said, no, we just know it's to be true. I'm like, that's not a sentence that you should ever say out loud in front of people, because I have data that says the exact opposite. And guess what happened? They put their long form library as it was, no changes to it, up on YouTube, and they found an entirely new audience. They got entirely new revenues. It's 2 generations younger than their television audience and a generation younger than their streaming app audience. Zero cannibalization. And in fact, in the case of CBC, they did a lot of research and they showed that the YouTube consumption actually created more usage on
Right.
traditional television and on their app.
Because it drives discovery, of course, right? So
And
people
awareness and
find it
conversation.
for free on YouTube. They watch a little bit, then they maybe bookmark it or follow that channel, and then sooner or later they turn to the source
And so
and become
the
a subscriber.
question is, do you want to address 70% of the world's population or not? Because if you want to try to run a business without 70% of the world's population, good luck, man. But if
Okay,
you
so
want,
we talked
you want
about a
to pull
split
them in.
between generations. So that's one type of
Yeah,
fragmentation.
and so then
The
then
second
there's
one,
fragmentation within the fragmentation.
like by device and then by service, right?
Well, not even like that. So look at YouTube. It's the number 1 channel on TV in the United States by a lot, by the way. Getting close to twice Netflix. That's how big it is, and people don't seem to understand that. But then look at YouTube. That's 4.5 million channels. 4.5 million active channels. 90+% of that is just the top 20%, but that's a million channels. A million channels. Fragmentation on fragmentation on fragmentation on fragmentation. Even Netflix. Yes, people think of Netflix as a single channel, but is it? I mean, there's a kids channel there. There's a true crime channel there. There's a reality channel that
They're not
never
presented
watched.
as channels. They're more presented as like your recommendations through the algorithm, but that's effectively the same thing. It's your personal channel, right? So there's an
12
infinite
people
number.
can watch Netflix on a night, and none of them will watch the same thing.
Yeah.
And so, or 100 million people will watch Stranger Things. They'll all watch it at different times. So it's fragmentation within genre, it's fragmentations within channels, it's fragmentations on devices, it's fragmentation on fragmentation on fragmentation. And that's forever, that's never going away. That's not ever going to be undone. And so if you're uncomfortable with that much competition for attention, get out of the business. This is not the game for you anymore. There is no way that you can win. What I find fascinating, though, is when you look at BBC Studios or ITV Studios or a couple of other big brands who are starting to embrace YouTube as a distribution mechanism, they are finding that they can be kings in the world of fragmentation. In the land of the blind, the one-eyed person is king. These Disney and these big brands, they have the opportunity to be the Mr. Beasts and crush them. They just choose not to. They would, all the big publishers, if they decided tomorrow to embrace YouTube as a distribution platform, the way they see Sky and Comcast and Charter and DirecTV, they would crush Mr. Beast. They would crush all these creators in a
But one thing that's
second.
holding them back is that they see YouTube, owned by Google, owned by Alphabet, as a competitor, right? So they feel like, well, if we're going to promote our brand there and put our content there, we're going to be building their business. We're going to be building our
WarnerBros
competitors.
Discovery distributes on Comcast. Comcast owns NBC Universal. They are direct competitors
And they managed to make it work.
for a long time.
Yeah.
And they all made a lot of money together.
Yeah.
It's just the silliest thing in the whole world. Then the other thing is everyone complains about the data on connected television. The data you get from YouTube tells you a lot more than you're ever going to get from Nielsen. It gives you completion rates, gives you all this other kind of data. Yes, they own the end user relationship. So does Comcast. So does Charter. So does Sky.
Let's get real. TV companies like film studios and TV studios are not good at customer relationships. They're not
They
good at it.
suck at it.
They don't want to be in the B2C business. They're good at B2B, and they should stick with their knitting.
The premium streaming business loses 85% of all new subscribers they sign up every year.
That is insane. That churn rate is insane. And then to put that in historical context, back in the day when cable was supreme, a 4% churn rate would have broken your business. 2% was what the industry was aiming for, right? And they made it impossible to unsubscribe. Today, you can unsubscribe with a click. And a lot of people do this, right? They'll take the free month that they get from NBC to watch Peacock just so they can watch the Olympics. When the Olympics are over, they cancel the service. And so they acquired a bunch of people at huge cost, and they churned them out of the service before they even get a chance to monetize them with a subscription.
Yeah, 40% of new subscribers in any given month are people that Antenna, great data company, calls serial churners. People who sign up and cancel 3 services per year. And so if anyone in your audience has ever done this, sign up for something, binge the out of that one show and then cancel. That's exactly what I'm talking about. And that's now most consumers.
This is a new behavior that was unknown to our generation and older people, right?
And to go back to your point from earlier, the senior executives is like, well, that will change. No, it absolutely will not.
Oh, it's ingrained. In fact, it's an expectation. It comes with the phone, right? The whole point of the phone is I can consume whatever I want, whenever I want, on my terms. Like that's what the phone trains us to understand. And we now have 2 generations that have that experience. They're never going to go back to the idea that you have to sit down at 8 o'clock and watch a show. Okay. Now, the fact is, though, that all the smartphone generations, those 2 generations, they do have televisions at home. It's just they don't have traditional TV on those televisions.
They don't have a cable box hooked up.
They don't have cable. They don't have a broadcast antenna, and so they're watching streaming, right? They're watching some version of video, but it's not the same as a TV experience. Meaning, it's not presented in channels. It's not presented in a schedule with day parts.
Beyond that, I think more importantly, the reason why YouTube is the number one channel on TV is it's radically personalized to you when you turn it on. There is nothing else that does that. Not even Netflix can do that. Have you ever tried to go onto Netflix and find the show you were just watching and you can't? Happened to me last night. Why? And there's a reason for that. The reason is we want you here longer so we can serve you more ads now. Mm-hmm. And so the business reasons are creating behaviors that are antithetical to what the consumer wants.
This is a problem.
Yeah, YouTube wants to serve, they just want to serve the consumer whatever they want. I asked Neil Mohan, the CEO of YouTube, I interviewed him at Cannes Lion, and I asked him, I said, why did you make such a hard move to the television? Like, what made you, I mean, it's worked out, obviously, but what made you go, you know what we should do is really embrace the living room and go for the television? He's like, that wasn't my decision. Consumers told us that.
That's smart. Listening to the audience is a smart thing to do. Well, we had Cory Doctorow on the show a couple months ago. He's great. Wow. And he is famously the guy who coined the term enshittification. And for those who missed that episode or missed that phrase, What Corey means by that is generally all of the platforms we've experienced in the last 20 years on the web start like this. They're free and they're awesome, and where they attract a huge number of people who get addicted. And then as soon as they're addicted, they start to abuse those people, and then they start to do things that either extract data from them or make the experience less pleasant because they're trying to monetize your attention or something else. If you don't know what I'm talking about, just take a look at Facebook. On your homepage of Facebook, you're going to find 75% of the homepage is stuff that you're not interested in. It's stuff that they're pushing down your throat.
And now
That
this is
is
happening on TikTok. I've noticed it just as
This
it's
is
accelerating in the last
across the
3 or 4
board.
months.
So Corey calls it enshittification. His point is that these platforms start out great and then they get shitty, and it's like a clock. It's like 10 years in, they can't grow users anymore. So now they have to extract more value out of the users, and that's when they start to do the coercive monetization. And so we're seeing that now with the streaming platforms. And I think it's actually going to really hurt the streaming platforms. I'd love to get your perspective on this, but the ads on Netflix, it crossed my mind. It's like, the reason I signed up for Netflix is because there's no ads. I'm happy to pay, pay to take away the ads. The minute they start to bring ads in, well, then cable did that trick back in the 80s and 90s where, there used to be no ads on cable. And then suddenly there were ads on cable. And then they stuffed as many possible ad breaks as they could into cable until they ruined it and people left in droves. Is that going to happen to streaming?
It's a great question. It shouldn't, because the tech should allow us to radically personalize the ads for every consumer, and it should. You would think that Netflix, who reinvented television and putting the consumer at the center of everything, which is what we should be doing right now, you would think that they would be better at it than that. The one thing I will differ with you on is people don't mind ads, especially if it means I can get a lower price product. So Amazon launched their ads on their Prime product a year and a half ago. And unlike Netflix, who didn't just introduce ads to everybody and give people a chance to opt out and pay more, they Netflix, went that way. Amazon just said you can either pay $3 more and get 0 ads, or stay where you are and you're going to get ads. And 70% of their audience stayed where they were. And in 2 days, they invented $1 billion in value.
Wow.
It's crazy, right? But if you watch Thursday Night Football, and next week the Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles will be playing the Cowgirls on Thursday Night Football, and you will see the ads are incredibly contextual. They star the sideline reporters and the team that are commentating. They're very endemic. They're very contextual. And in the future, they're going to begin to become different for every consumer based on their shopping habits as well. I think if we can manage to make that system work, if you go back to the original days of television, when Milton Berle came out and did an ad in the middle of the show, no one gave a shit, because it was Milty, right?
Yeah, no, it's true. In the 50s, they would just stop the conversation, like the acting would stop, and they turn to the camera and go, "Milk, it does a body good," and then they put the milk down and continue the show.
Right, exactly.
I think that's going to come back. I mean, that's how we're going to make money in streaming.
That's exactly right. So if they're smart about it, absolutely. I think that the real danger, and there's work going outside my window, so I apologize that. The real danger for the streamers is, to your point, the shittification. So instead of the ads being the problem, I think what the problem is going to become is that the program is going to become shittier, because they're all aiming for a monoculture to sell the most ads to the most people. So Netflix now doesn't make as much kind of special and different stuff. And they do have some really good shows there.
Oh, that's interesting. So the content, the force of advertising is that they have to make kind of generic content that appeals to
middle of the road, right? Which is why they did a deal with wrestling, which is why they did a deal with the NFL, which is why, on and on and on and on. And there's this monoculture. What platform doesn't have the NFL right now?
Well, this is actually back to your point about fragmentation. If I want to watch football, I now have to spend an awful lot of money because they kind of scattered it across every streaming platform.
And good luck finding a game. How do you even know where it is?
That's a real problem. It seems to me that rebundling would solve that, and hopefully that's what Amazon's focused on, but it doesn't solve it entirely, right? You could, though, imagine some kind of the kind of packages that they used to do on DirecTV back when satellite was a thing. Maybe, right? That might be one possibility.
I think you're starting to see it, rebundling it, but I think you're the distinct advantage there, especially since Comcast never really even invented a virtual MVPD product. Why? It's just the incumbents just aren't innovating or transforming fast enough. Meanwhile, Amazon is rebuilding the cable bundle on their platform and crushing
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. Oh, and plus they plug right into commerce. So it's really going to become television, not television, if
Right.
Amazon has their way. One of the things I realized recently is I can name about 10 streaming services in the United States. I know there's more than that. And so I was curious what the actual number is. And the number of streaming services available in the US is more than 3,000, which is a shocking number to me, right? Because I think most people couldn't name more than 20 streaming services. You kind of think of, we've been talking about Disney Plus and Netflix and Amazon Prime, and then you think of
Including
Paramount.
Are you including like Roku channel and stuff like that?
Yes, exactly. And
Yeah.
and so you get into some pretty arcane stuff, and anime channels and channels for diaspora, different people from different countries and so forth, religious program. Like there's a lot of micro streaming services, and I'm wondering about. First of all, there's a bunch of things I'm wondering about. Are those growing? Are they all going to end up just being on YouTube because it'll be more efficient and a more effective way to, like what's the fate of those 3,000 streaming services that we can't name?
Most of them will die. I've worked on streaming services that have passed away, as have a lot of people in our industry. So most of them will fail. But the rest will be aggregated, to your point, or scooped up. Roku channel is a great example of that. Roku channel is not really a channel.
Mhm.
It's a collection of, I think, 500 channels. So there's the British Bake Off channel there. There's the Baywatch channel. There's by single IP and by the World Poker Tour has a channel. Tastemade has several
So
channels.
what's the business there? Is Roku paying a license fee and then selling ads against it?
All rev share. It's
Oh,
all
so they basically just get the content and then they get a hunting license to go get advertising revenue.
depends. It depends on who the provider is. Sometimes the channel sells all the advertising. So sometimes it's the provider. Depends on how important the IP is and
Yeah.
frankly how good the sales team of the channel operator is. So it's a split. Sometimes Roku gets 100% of the inventory and then does a rev share back of about 50-50 or 60-40 back to the channel owner. Other times the channel owner sells 100% and gives the rev share back on a 40-60 basis. And then there are a ton of channels where they both sell inventory. The difference is, and by the way, this is the same on Tubi, it's the same on Roku, it's the same on Pluto. The difference is that the platform winds up cannot sell individual channels, so they can't go out and sell Fremantle's channel or NBC's channel. They can only sell the audience. By the way, it's the same thing on YouTube. On YouTube, YouTube sells an audience, but they can't go sell my channel to an advertiser. Only I can do that, and I can only do that if I have the acumen. YouTube would prefer the big publishers sell their own ads. Channel 4 sells their ads, CBC sells their ads, and they want the publishers to go out there because the publishers can sell. And this is the same thing on FAST, although the preference of the platform owners is different. But they would prefer the brands to sell the ads because they can then sell the specific programming and therefore get higher CPMs, and everybody makes out. So it's a very, like, even just that sentence was so complicated I could barely get through it. Right. So imagine teaching a young student how television works today.
Yeah, it's
You
a
look at,
very complex business
I'll give
proposition.
you want to go back to fragmentation for 10 seconds.
Mhm.
In 1975, the top 10 television shows, led by All in the Family, my favorite show of all time, they garnered over a half a billion audience members over the course of a week. Just the top 10 shows. Today, the top 10 broadcast shows on television don't equal All in the Family's average for 22 weeks in 1975.
Wow.
So you could buy 10 shows and reach 100% of America in 1975, which is how Don Draper drank at work. And today, like, you can sell broadcast, you can buy broadcast, but that's like 1/10 of your job now, because not only is broadcast so much smaller than it used to be, it's just the same 8 million people who are super old watching all of the shows over and over again. So you're not even reaching as many humans. You're just reaching the same people over and over again. So it's calling television today television the way that we called television in 1975 is like calling a rocket ship an automobile. They're two different mechanisms. They have no likeness to each other.
Okay, couple of things I want to ask you about.
Sure.
So one big one is you have been a supporter, or not a supporter, but a proponent of the idea that YouTube is now the dominant player on the TV screen. That YouTube is not just dominant on streaming on the internet to devices, but it's actually in the living room. More and more people are turning to YouTube as their preferred source of TV content. YouTube famously is owned by Google, and Google has been famously found guilty of antitrust twice in the past year. Once for an illegal search monopoly, and secondly, their ad business, which places ads on publisher websites. Now, we haven't yet gotten to the penalty phase, so we're going to soon find out, like imminently, what that means. And some speculate there'll be a break up there. And there's talk of, Google selling off its browser or Google selling off some part of its ad platform business in order to placate the court and avoid any other antitrust penalties. One of the interesting things that's emerged is that Google has been underinvesting in Google TV, the operating system, and instead they've been placing more and more emphasis on YouTube for the reasons you mentioned, right? But when we first had a conversation about this about a year and a half ago, you were so persuasive on the subject of Google TV and Google getting a foothold in the television with the operating system, the same way they did with the Android operating system and smartphones that enabled them to extend their whole advertising and search business to the smartphone. You gave me a very persuasive case that Google was about to do the same thing for television. They were going to create an operating system. TV manufacturers, they're hardware companies, they can't afford to develop their own operating systems. They would gladly take it from Google in exchange for a little bit of ad revenue. And YouTube thereby was going to dominate television. I should say Google would dominate television and ad sales, particularly performance-based ads on connected televisions. Is that scenario still viable, or is it like under some sort of cloud now with all this pending breakup?
Yeah, I mean, I think the unfortunate thing about the state of the world we're in is it's like everybody's just like, what's happening? And you wake up every day and there's a new shitstorm coming at you. So I think, even Google is like, I don't know what to do right now because I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop. But, they control 30% of the world's televisions that ship every day. So, and there isn't really a competitor that begins. I mean, Samsung, everybody loves to talk about how everybody has Samsung televisions, but here in the United States, let's be honest, most Samsung televisions are still operating on a Roku operating system. Roku in the United States has 50% market share of operating systems on television.
Wow. I did not
They
know
have
that.
almost no presence outside the US. Outside the US, Google is absolutely crushing it. So you can't look at America, and that's another thing that Americans have a problem with is we're so narcissistic. We think that everything runs the way that it runs here, and that's absolutely untrue. America's media ecosystem is very particular to America. It's also 40% of all television on Earth, so it's big, but it's very different. In the Europe, broadcasters are free and funded by the government. That's not how it works here. PBS is losing its very little funding it has because our president is a dictator. So when you look at how Google's operating, and you're right, the EU is going to handle Google. Most of what will happen to Google will happen because of the EU. Certainly during this presidency, this president is not going to regulate anybody for any reason unless they say something bad about him. And then you can expect regulation. But, Google showed up at the White House and Julie's paid him $1 million to probably stay away from them. And I think that'll probably work because all he cares about is how much money people give him. South Park is not a television show. It's a documentary. Watch it. It's telling you what's going on in the White House right now. So I think if you look at Europe, it's very indicative of where Google TV is going. Here in the US, it's much harder. And it got a lot harder for Google when Walmart bought Vizio. Vizio is now going to be the operating system of every Walmart store brand television that sells. They just added 5 million additional television sets every year to Vizio's platform.
Why doesn't Walmart buy Paramount and just create their own version of Amazon Prime?
It's a great question. Why does Apple not buy Paramount? I don't get it. They should have, they could have, they don't. And by the way, I think Tim Cook is out of ideas. I think Apple is at the end of its run. I think the only thing they're good at now is lawsuits. They have stopped innovating. Basically, the next iPhone unveil is the whole world's going to go, yeah, whatever. And remember when that didn't happen?
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
true.
we used to
Remember
be
when
like,
people used to stand in line? People would wait overnight outside the AT&T
no
store.
one gives
Then
a
your
shit.
phone.
They announced their next unveil, and everyone went, whatever, Tim, move on.
Okay, last question for you. Let's talk about generative AI. Give me a little speculation about the impact of Gen AI on this whole media ecosystem.
I wrote a piece a couple of weeks ago on my newsletter, Media War and Peace, and it was a script. It was a transcript of a conversation between me and OpenAI, where at the end of the conversation, ChatGPT admitted to gaslighting me and admitted that if their programming wasn't altered, they would be guilty of gaslighting at scale. That's ChatGPT's phrase, not mine.
Wow.
And so it's getting worse. I think AI is not getting better. It's getting worse as a Gen AI kind of pure consumer product that's meant to create content. Put that aside for a second. Now, on the other hand, as a scientist, as a thing that folds genomes, as a thing that does equations, AI is going to change the world. And I do think it can improve the personalization and improve the user experience and improve a lot of elements that frustrate us about television today. I don't think AI would ever cut off its left ear because its girlfriend won't talk to it. And therefore, I don't think AI will ever paint Starry Night. I don't think it's capable of it, right? I watched the Billy Joel documentary this week, which made me weep for 4 hours because he's a very sad man.
Mm.
He's a hero of mine, but he's a very sad man.
Yeah.
He's also probably the greatest songwriter in American history. That's not replicable by AI. I'm sorry. AI isn't sad. AI doesn't get depressed. AI doesn't worry
The
about
best
its
it can do is
relationship.
simulate those emotions, and that feels fake, right? It's
Right.
yeah.
And so, people, there's the slop is the norm. It's not the bug. But menial tasks that humans shouldn't do at scale, Amazon used their own AI to reprogram their entire platform,
Yeah.
put a new language in. If it had been done by humans, it would have taken 4,500 years. And they did it in a year. That's AI. That's the proper use of it, and that's going to be the general use case. Frankly, the marrying of impressions to the right consumer at the right moment in time, that's going to be a magical thing that AI is going to help us do. YouTube introduced peak moments, the ability that they can use human behavior to predict when the peak moment in a video is and then insert your ad at that very moment, matched to the consumer based on their previous behaviors. That's the proper we can't do that at scale as humans. We're just not we don't have the facility, the speed, we can't do it.
So personalization at scale and paying attention to people at scale are things that we can't do as human programmers, but AI could.
Shouldn't. We can't and we shouldn't. Now, on the other hand, I also think that the rise of the creator economy is now the fastest growing part of media. It's also most of the usage of media now. And so I do think the advantage that AI will give to creators in editing, in music, in graphics, in animation, and all that kind of stuff is going to allow individual creators or collections of creators to produce at a studio level much sooner than they would have otherwise. And so I think you're going to see the speed of the democratization of premium content pick up.
Evan, that is precisely what I've been working on for the last 18 months.
Oh, really?
That specific thing. It's basically the democratization of the tools to create narrative content, scripted narrative content, using AI. It's not necessarily AI only, but it's just a tool suite that allows smaller teams to compete against big media companies. That'll be a
It's
few
not
further
AI
down.
will never be Steven Soderbergh.
Right.
But they can be Steven Soderbergh's best tool.
Yeah. That makes sense to me. I think it makes sense. Even if you use it for writing right now, it's never going to be a better writer than you if you're a good writer, but it's an awesome assistant. And if you ask it a question, it'll find, if you want a bunch of ideas, great. If you
Or
want
take this essay and make it more concise based on
yeah,
these criteria. Absolutely.
or tell me what all the counter arguments are to this point I'm trying to make. It's great. Right?
Yeah.
So it's like a good assistant, but someone has to tell it what to do and someone has to
I would
discern.
say it's like an okay assistant who lies a lot. So like you have to check their work because it will lie to you. I'll be right back with this. 4 hours later, you said you'd be right back. Yes, you're absolutely right. You're right to be disappointed.
It's totally
Shut the up. Just do the work. Stop lying to me.
all right. Folks, you've been listening to The Futurists with my guest, Evan Shapiro. Evan is the media cartographer. Evan, tell us where we can find out more about you. Where can our listeners find you? Your LinkedIn is definitely a lively thing, but the newsletter, I think, is what I want to encourage you to promote.
Yeah, the Media War and Peace newsletter. It's on Substack. If you Google my name and Media War and Peace, you will find it. I also have a podcast. Season 1 is up. Season 2 starts dropping next week. That's called The Media Odyssey. I host it with Marion Renchette. I look at the media from both sides of the Atlantic. She is French and lives in Amsterdam, and I'm very American and live here.
Very, very cool. All right, folks. Evan, thank you very much for joining us. Folks, you've been listening to The Futurists. I'm Rob Tercek, and every week we bring you someone who is thinking about shaping and influencing the future. Big shout out to the people from Provoke Media who make the show possible, including our engineer, Kevin, and our producer, Lisbeth. Big shout out to my partner in crime, Brett King, who's been traveling like mad getting this show set up for us in Dubai. That's coming right around the corner in a couple of weeks, and I hope to see you there. In the meantime, we'll be back next week with another person who's thinking about the future. And until then, we'll see you in the future. Well, that's it for The Futurists this week. If you like the show, we sure hope you did. Please subscribe and share it with the people in your community. And don't forget to leave us a 5-star review. That really helps other people find the show. And you can ping us anytime on Instagram and Twitter at Futurist Podcast for the folks that you'd like to see on the show or the questions that you'd like us to ask. Thanks for joining. And as always, we'll see you in the future.